Hello, engineers. I'm welcoming you to the lecture number A6, that is under CE 2219, Statics and Introduction to Mechanics of Materials. What we're going to look at today basically is the structural analysis. If you can remember from the past lectures, that is starting from the first lecture, lecture 1 up to lecture 5, we are trying to create some tools, some principles of designing structures. We first started with representing structures into a particle, but later in chapter 5, or rather lecture 5, we changed our, instead of us using a structure as a particle, we started analyzing it as a structure, or rather a rigid body, because in reality you will never find any infrastructure or any building that can behave like a particle. They are all behaving like bodies in 3D. So in this case, we are going to look at how we are going to analyze the structures as rigid bodies. All of us, if you can recall what a rigid body is. This, of course, is a body that is not supposed to deform after the application of a load. So, this lecture A6 will basically look at trusses. We'll start with two-dimension trusses, that is the plane trusses. Then at the end, we'll look at a space truss. That is now looking at those trusses in 3 dimensions. The main objectives of this lecture is just to show how we are supposed to determine the forces in the members of a truss using methods of joints and methods of sections. There are 2 ways of analyzing a truss or a structure, but under this lecture we are going to look at those 2 methods. The first method is by joints, and the second one will be by the method of sections. As you can see on your left, you can see that this is it looks like a machine, right? This machine, for this fitter to continue doing whatever it's doing there, is assuming that this system or this machine is stable. For this machine to be stable, it simply means all these members are working as one. Hence, this system is in equilibrium. On the right side, you can see a 3-dimensional truss. Hope it's clear that you can see that there are some people there standing with confidence that this truss is firm. No one will be injured. There is no vibration there. That's why you can see people, they are at peace without any fear or danger. This simply shows that this truss, each and every member that you can see, they are working as one, as that rigid body, and they are in equilibrium. They are in equilibrium. Introduction. The definition: structure refers a system of connected parts used to support loads, such as, of course, buildings, bridges, dams, towers, and so on. Structural analysis: this is the design of the performance of a given structure under prescribed loads or other external effects such as support movements and temperature changes. So as we analyze or as we design our trusses or our structures, we consider the supports, right? Of course, you try to avoid those movements, and there's also the effect of temperature. But this course would not basically consider temperature changes. We'll do this component where we are going to include temperature changes on a specific body or of a structure. It will be done, I think, in the second term. That will be under the strength of materials. Then, of course, structural engineers, they will analyze and design new structures, investigate the capacity and serviceability of existing structures, develop retrofit members for existing structures with inadequate capacity, forensic investigations, research and development. Here, these are just some pictures for those who really would want to be civil engineers, structural engineers, mechanical engineers, and of course our colleagues from mines. These are some of the infrastructure or structures that you might design, that is in future. So here you can see this is a bridge made, of course, of this is a rope. Yeah, this is as you can see, this is a rope, and these are the trusses. The supports, they are also made of trusses. When you come to this one, you can see these are the trusses, and these are made of reinforced concrete. This is also a bridge. Then here, this is another building made of, as you can see, a number of members working as one. This is also another truss. As you can see, the supports there, there are trusses there, there are members there, and there are ropes, making sure that the supports remain in equilibrium. Then here, this is a tower, this is another building, this is another bridge. This is for those who normally watch football. These are some of the structures that I thought maybe I should share. In the previous lecture, we discussed the equilibrium of rigid bodies, i.e., these are system of connected members treated as a single rigid body. We are just looking at the supports. So the body, the rigid body, looking at the supports without looking at the forces, the forces and the strength of each member that is making that rigid body. Of course, we first drew a free body diagram showing all forces external to this isolated body, and then we applied the force and moment equations of equilibrium. In lecture 6 and 7, we will focus on determination of the forces internal to a structure, that is, forces of action and reaction between the connected members. An engineering structure is any connected system of members built to support or transfer forces and to safely withstand the loads applied to it. To determine the forces
internal to an engineering structure, we must dismember the structure and analyze separate free body diagrams of individual members or a combination of members. This analysis requires careful application of Newton's third law. If you can remember, I mentioned about the Newton's law, but when we are doing a structure analysis, we always need to remember and apply Newton's third law, which states each action is accompanied by an equal and opposite reaction. Let us not forget about this. In this chapter, we will analyze the internal forces acting in several types of structures. These are trusses, frames, and machines. But just for this first lecture, in terms of structure analysis, where we are only going to look at trusses. In this treatment, we consider only statically determinant structures, which do not have more supporting constraints than are necessary to maintain an equilibrium configuration. What this simply means is the type of problems that you are going to encounter will only having a situation where you would find the equal number of unknowns to the number of equations. You won't have a situation whereby you have more unknowns than the number of our equations of equilibrium. The analysis of trusses, frames, and machines and beams under concentrated loads constitutes a straightforward application of the material developed in the previous lecture. You can remember, you all understand, you can analyze a building, you can analyze a structure in terms of equilibrium. So we are going to use the same principles, we are going to use the same tools that we already developed from the previous lectures to analyze our members, to analyze our structures. The only difference is we will now be looking at the internal members. But from the previous lectures, we are just looking at the external support. This time, it will be both the external and internal. The external, these will be the supports, and the internal, these, each member, you are supposed to calculate, you are supposed to analyze the force within each member making that rigid body. So in this lecture, only trusses will be discussed. The basic procedure developed in chapter 3 and chapter 5 for isolation a body by constructing a correct free body diagram is essential for the analysis of statically determinant structures. Recall, I had emphasized that find time and read lecture, it was chapter 3 from our famous book, that is Russell, 14th edition, where you are supposed to appreciate and understand how to draw free body diagrams. So, if you understand how to draw a free body diagram, this will be your tool. Without coming out with a free body diagram, it will be very difficult for you to analyze any member, any structure. Therefore, you need to recall and to remember how to draw a correct free body diagram. This is the first step when you are analyzing a structure. Here, I'm just showing you some examples of some trusses. These are the names, these are the common trusses that has been used for bridges. And these on the right, these are trusses that have been used for most of the roofs that you see on this building. A planar truss is one where all members and nodes lie within a two-dimensional plane, while a space truss has members and nodes that extend into 3 dimensions. So, in short, a planar is the one that is in 2 dimensions, a space truss is the one that is in 3 dimensions. So here I'm just showing you an example of a 2D truss. While here I'm showing you a tower, those normally used for communication, like those for Airtel, Zamtel, and MTN. This one is a 3D structure, while the one on top is a 2D structure. So, the top beams in a truss are called top chords and are typically in compression. Here I'm showing you some upper chords which are normal. It's not always, depending on how the loads have been applied. But the way it is, where it is only being supported at the far and the first end, chances are high that the upper chord will be in compression, while the bottom chord will be in tension. What normally happens here, maybe just to demonstrate, is the way the truss is behaving. You would find that the upper chord would behave in this manner, something like that. And this also applies to the bottom chord. Now this part here is in tension, while this other part here is in compression.
We are going to start with a plain truss. This is just a truss in 2D. We just consider the X and Y axis. A framework composed of members joined at their ends to form a rigid body is called a truss. Or a truss is a structure composed of slender members joined together at their end points. Slender in this case would mean the thickness of that member versus the length of that member. You divide the thickness over the length. If you are going to get something less than 0.025, then it's a slender member. But if you are going to find something that is more than that, it's no longer a slender member. You understand this about slender member, I think in third year and fourth year, those who are going to do designing of columns, you find out, they'll explain what a slender column is. Bridges, roof supports, derricks, and other such structures are common examples of trusses, as I've shown you on the other slide. Structural members commonly used are beams, channels, angles, bars, and special shapes which are fastened together at their ends by either welding, using a rivet, any other connection, bolts, or pins. When the members of a truss lay essentially in single plane, it is called a plain truss. As I earlier alluded, these are just trusses in 2D X and Y axis. The members commonly used in construction consist of wooden struts or metal bars. The truss shown below there is an example of a typical roof supporting truss. In this figure, the roof load is transmitted to the truss at the joints by means of series of paddings. These are the paddings. These are the members that are supporting the roofing material, the asbestos, the ABR,
the iron sheets direct, and from there, that's when the pairings is now transmitting the load from the roof to the truss. So this drawing is just showing you these are the loads that are coming from the roof, the iron sheets, the asbestos, the tiles. They are coming from the pairings to the members or to the truss itself. So these are the loads coming from the roof, as in the roofing material, either the asbestos, the iron sheets, or the tiles. Then these are the supports. Of course, assuming, as you can see here, there is a pin. Where there's a connection with a pin, you need two supports. That is one in the X and one in the Y, which is one in the X and one in the X and one in the Y. And when you can see here, there's just a roller there. Where there's a roller, you only need one support, which is just one in the Y-axis. So as you can see, that is the force. That will be force in the Y. And here you're going to have another one, force in the Y, and another force there in the X. These are the supports. Then these are the internal members. These are the internal members which we need to analyze to find the forces within each internal member. In the case of a beam, of a bridge, as you can see, there is a connection made of in the case of a bridge, as shown, the load on the deck, this is the deck, this timber thing that you can see, that is the deck, is first transmitted to the stringers. These are the supports, they are called stringers. Then to the floor beams, and finally to the joints of the two supporting side truss. When bridge or roof truss extend over large distances, a rocker or roller is commonly used for supporting one end, as shown. As you can see A there, that is a roller. This type of support allows freedom for expansion or contraction of the members due to change in temperature or application of loads. Now, when you look at this member, or rather this bridge truss, you can solve it either as in 3D, the way you can see it, like the way it is here, or you can solve it as 2D. When we are analyzing our members of a truss, we make certain assumptions. So, to design both the members and the connection of a truss, it is necessary first to determine the force developed in each member when the truss is subjected to a given load. To do this, we will make two important assumptions. One, the members are assumed to be connected only by frictionless pins. Two, the loads must be applied at the joints. The loads must be applied at the joints, not anywhere. Loads are supposed to be applied at the joints. Because of these two assumptions, each truss member will act as a two-force member. This simply means when you look at a member here, right, it has got two forces with the opposite directions. The other one facing in that direction and the other one facing that direction. This simply means it is in tension. There is a trend of this force trying to increase the length of that member. This is called tension. Even if when you cut this member at a certain distance, you're still going to have two forces acting in two different directions, and they are of the same magnitude. So this is showing you that it is in tension. The other one showing you C, this is just showing you that this is compression. Compression, this is a trend. This force is trying to reduce the length of the member. That is compression. So we are supposed, each and every time, we are supposed to know whether our member is in compression or our member is in tension. If the force tends to elongate the member, as I've already explained, it is a tensile force. Whereas if it tends to shorten the member, it is a compressive force. In the actual design of truss, it is important to state whether the nature of the force is in tensile or compression. Often compression members must be made thicker than tension members because of the buckling or column effect that occurs when a member is in compression. You understand better when you've been third year and fourth year when you start designing, as an example, columns. We still continue with simple trusses, the analysis of simple trusses. If three members are pin connected at their ends, they form a triangular truss that will be rigid, as shown, which is that. Attaching two more members and connecting these members to a new joint D forms a larger truss, as we have added AD and PC. This procedure can be repeated many times to get a larger truss. If a truss can be constructed by expanding the basic triangular truss in this way, it is called a simple truss. Two methods for the force analysis of simple trusses will be discussed. The free body diagram of the truss as a whole is shown in this figure. This is the free body diagram of this truss. The external reactions are usually determined first by applying the equilibrium equations to the truss as a whole. You all remember how to find the R1 and R2. As an example on how to find the R1 and R2, it's just in this case it will just be a summation of forces in the Y should be equals to 0, right? Then what we are going to get, we are going to have R1 plus R2 is equals to L, right? As our first equation, right? So we have two unknowns, that is R1 and R2. So how am I going to find R1 and R2? So I'm supposed to find another equation because there are two unknowns. So I'm supposed to have two equations. So the second equation that I can create there is summation of moments, I would say about R1 should be equals to 0. So in this case, if I say this is maybe say x, the distance, and again from here to there it is x1, right? So summation of moments about R1 about this point should be equals to 0, right? In this case, this is a 2D problem. We are going to use the scalar method, that is the force multiplied times the distance perpendicular to where the force has been applied. So in this case, using summation of moments about R1 is equals to 0. So the first one that I'm going to have, it will be x1, that is the distance, times L. So in this case, when you look at that member, force L is rotating in this manner. So I'm going to say that rotation is going to be negative. So I'm going to say negative. And R2 is rotating counterclockwise. For me, positive, that negative, right? So this one will be a plus, right? Which will be x1 times R2. This is equals to 0 as equation number 2. So I have two equations and two unknowns. Very simple for you to use your mathematics just by saying, okay, I'm going to find my R2. Once you find your R2, because your R2 would be equals to x1 L over no. This is supposed to be x. This is not x1. No. This is supposed to be. This is just supposed to be x. Yeah, that's just supposed to be x. There is no x1. So it is going to be, which is going to be xl over x1. You have your R2. Once you have your R2, you go back to your R1 plus you have that is xl over x1 R1. No. That is, this is supposed to be R2, not R1. This is supposed to be R2. Sorry for that. This is supposed to be R2. Right. Yeah. This is how you are going to find the reactions. That is the R1 and R2. Hope this is clear. The first method that we are going to use, as we are going to be analyzing our simple trusses, will be the method of joints. In order to analyze or design a truss, it is necessary to determine the force in each of its members by applying the method of joints. This method is based on the fact that if the entire truss is in equilibrium, then each of its joints is also in equilibrium. As I mentioned on those pictures that I showed you, where you saw people standing on a deck, right? That structure, the way it was designed, it is in equilibrium, meaning each and every member that is making that structure is also in equilibrium. Hence, if the free body diagram of each joint is drawn, the force equilibrium equations can then be used to obtain the member forces acting on each joint. Since the members of a plane truss are straight two force members laying in a plane, this is 2D, each joint is subjected to a force system that is coplanar and concurrent. As a result, only summation of forces in the X, summation of forces in the Y need to be satisfied for that equilibrium. So here we have a truss made of 3 members. We have a truss made of 3 members. The first member is AB, the other one is AC, and the other one is BC. Right? Then the first thing that we do, we draw the free body diagram of the truss. We have, that is our truss, right? I know that there is a force there in that direction, and it's 500 Newton, right? Then I know the distance, that is 2 meters, and again the distance from here up to there, it is 2 meters, and I know the angle there is 45 degrees. This is A, that is C, and that is B. When you look at this connection and that connection, that is a pin, right? So if that is a pin, we need 2 supports there, one in the X and one in the Y. So the first thing that we're supposed to do before we draw our forces, we make certain assumptions. We make certain assumptions. So is your force in the X axis going to be facing the left or facing the right? Which also applies for the force in the Y. Is it going to be facing up or facing down? These are the assumptions that we make. But for me, from the experience that I have, for this truss to be in equilibrium, already you have given me a force of 500 Newton, which is going to the right. So I also need a force which is directing in the opposite direction. So me, I'm going to start with a force which will be AX, right? Right? Then from here, when we look at, before I go to the y-axis on A, I go to C. At C, we only need, is a roller. We only need one support. And that support, normally, the force that the truss is applying on the support itself, on this support, it is always supposed to create a force which is opposite to the support which comes from the truss. Can you remember the third Newton's law? So for me, I'm going to say the other force would be facing up like that. And this will be CY. So once I have that, I know I've got only one force which is in the y-axis, right? So I need another force from A. So when I look at where the direction, where CA, the direction of CA, I also need another force which is opposite CA for that truss to be in equilibrium. So in this case, our AY would be facing down. That would be our AY. Right? And how to get those forces, the way I explained, the first thing you do, summation of forces in the x is equals to 0. Summation of forces here, what do you have? We have got only two forces in the x-axis. That is your ax, right? When you look at the direction of ax and the direction of 500, you say going to the left. These are forces, these are not moments, these are forces. Going to the left, I'm going to say is positive. So going to the left, you say is positive. Going to the right, it's negative. So here to be positive, then minus. Going to the right is negative, that is going to be 500 Newton equals to 0. Then you find your ax. You do the same, you go to the summation of forces in the y is equals to 0. Again, you agree. Going down, let it be positive. It depends what you want. Then going up, it's negative. You do the same. You have got two unknowns there, right? You have got ay and cy. So, in short, ay is equals to cy. But how are you going to get ay or cy? You are going to apply now summation of moments about t. Summation of moments about A is equals to 0. Or summation of moments about C is equals to 0. Then you would find your AY and you'd find your CY. When using the method of joints, always start at a joint having at least one known force and at most two unknown forces. So in this case, we have got A with 2, right? If you remember, here we are going to have, I think if I can remember what I drew, here we are going to have a force that is AX, and here we are going to have another force that is CY, and here there is another force AY, right? So in this case at A, I have got two unknowns. In fact, I'm going to have 4 unknowns. Which 4 unknowns? The other one is F A B, this force. The other one is force A C. So I'm going to have how many unknowns? F A B, F A C, A X, and A Y. So here you have 4 unknowns, right? It is very difficult for you to solve that problem because here we only have 3 equations. 3 equations: summation of forces in the X, summation of forces in the Y, summation of moments about C or about B. We have 3 equations, 4 unknowns. It's very difficult for you to do that. When you go to C, you would find there is another force, which is FC or FBC, and CY and FAC. 3 unknowns, right? So the easiest way is to go where you have got one known force, which happens to be point B. So you can see from this example, they started with the point B, where we have a 500, right? So where this came from, after you came up with a free body diagram of the truss as a complete structure, you now dismantle. What do I mean by dismantle? You are going to get member A, member AB, right? This will be force AB, right? What do we have? Already I've got, there's a pin connection there, right? You can tell him that I'm on class. Then you have another member there. This is AY, this is AX, right? Right? We have those forces there, and at the same time, we are supposed to have forces within the member itself. And here you can remember that there is another 500, right? Right? So from here, you now get the forces within the member itself. Here we assume, is this member in tension or in compression? Is this member in tension or in compression? You can assume to say, okay, for me it is in tension or it is in compression. At the end, you would find, if you assume that it's in tension or in compression, if you find a negative answer, then your assumption that you made was not correct. If you find a negative answer, your assumption is not correct, which means you are supposed to reverse. If you said it was in compression, you now make it to be in tension. So in this case, I can assume to say, okay, it is in compression, which will be force AB. Hope this is clear. So in this way, application of summation of forces in the X, summation of forces in the Y yields two algebraic equations which can be solved for the two unknowns. When applying these equations, the correct sense of an unknown member force can be determined using one or two possible methods. The first method is by inspection, as I earlier mentioned. Then the next one is by assumption. By assumption is the one that I have mentioned, that if you assume that it is in tension or it is in compression, you look at the final answer that you get. If you are going to find a negative, then it means your assumption was wrong. Therefore, you need to reverse. If it was in compression, it goes to tension, and vice versa. By inspection, when you look at our drawing there at point B, we already have a force which is we just don't have enough space, but there is a force here which is F. There is a force which is FBC, the one that you can see there. When the assumption that he made here, he said that it's going to be in tension, right? From the joint itself, a tension. Take note that tension, it's a force moving from that connection. So in this case, that is tension. But within a member, when you draw it like that, that is compression. Take note of that. But from a joint, from A, the 500 is in tension, the FBA is in tension, the FBC is in compression. So, by inspection, you have a force 500 Newton. That is at point B. I don't know the force, whether compression or tension, BC and BA. So the first thing that I would do by inspection is to say at point B, point B, I only have a force 500, right? Then a force BC, for that joint to be in equilibrium, where am I supposed to apply the force? Am I supposed to apply the force in the same direction as 500 Newton or opposite 500 Newton? So by inspection, you can see that the 500 needs a force which is opposite to 500, opposite the direction of 500 Newton. So in this case, it will be like that. That will be FBC. Right? Then when I come to force BA, when I say summation of forces in the Y, summation of forces in the Y, I only have one force which is FBC. So summation of forces in the Y, FBC, the component of FBC will be facing upwards. Right? The component of FBC will be facing upwards. So for the force for that point, for that joint to be in equilibrium, I also need another force which acts opposite to that component of FBC. So for me, from as inspection, I would put it direct opposite to FBC. So this would be FBA. This method is by inspection. When you do your calculation, you will find that the direction of the angle, direction of the members, direction of the forces that we have put there, they are correct. Because it makes sense. We have used the principles of equilibrium on a given point. This comes from, if the whole body is in equilibrium, this simply means all member, all joint, all point is also in equilibrium. I think I've already explained on the method number 1, that is by inspection. A positive answer indicates that the sense is correct, whereas a negative answer indicates that the sense shown on the free body diagram must be reversed. Take note of this. If you find a negative force, your assumption that you made was not correct. You need to reverse. If it was negative, if the force was negative, then your assumption, if it was in tension, change that to be in compression. And that also applies for if your assumption was in compression. The second method is by assuming the unknown member forces acting on the joints FBB to be in tension. If this is done, then in numerical solutions of the algebraic equations, we use positive scalars for members in tension and negative scalars for members in compression. Once an unknown member force is found, use its correct magnitude and sense tension or compression on those subsequent joint free body diagrams. What this means, if the assumption that we made on B, then we find that FBA is giving us negative whatever figure. Let me say negative maybe K. Maybe negative K Newton, right? Then I know that the force that I had put there is the assumption that I made was not correct. So I'm supposed to reverse. I put the force to be in that manner. This also applies for if I find FBC to be negative, maybe say Z Newton. That's just an example. I'm supposed to change the sense, the direction to be like that. the first example. Compute the force in each member of the loaded cantilever truss by the method of joints. The first thing that we do is to draw a free body diagram. Is to draw a free body diagram. We have forces 30, we have forces 20 kilonewton, and we have the distances from A to C, C to E, B to D as 5 meters. And the force from D to wherever that point, it is perpendicular to DE. If you can remember the steps, the procedure of analyzing this truss, we said it becomes easier for you to start with a point which has got one known force and 2 unknown. Still, if you want, you can come up with a free body diagram of the whole body. Right here, of course, is a pin. You are going to have a force and another. This is just an assumption. This will be EX and this will be EY. Right? Then what do we have at D there? At D, from your free body diagram, you are just going to have just a single force there. But when you look at this joint here, that joint is showing you that they are supposed to have a moment there, because that looks to be fixed, right? So if it's fixed, they're supposed to have a moment, right? You're supposed to have a force there and another force there. But you have been told to compute the forces in each member. The easiest way I would start with joint A. It's very easy. If you want, you can still do it the other way. But for me, I would say you start with joint A. So joint A, I'm going to have a force that is 30 kilonewton. Then I have another force there and another force there. Right? So from my inspection, force AB, is it going to be in tension or compression? From my inspection, when I say summation of forces in the Y, I already have got a force which is 30, which is facing downwards, right? So summation of forces, the only force which would counter-react the force that is the 30 kilonewton is force FAB. So in this case, it's supposed to be in tension. Then I come to my force AC. From my inspection, when I say summation of forces in the X, the only force that will counteract the force FAC is force FAB. And you look at force FAB, the direction will be in the right side, right? So in this case, for that moment, for that force to be in equilibrium, or for that joint to be in equilibrium, you need the FAC to be in compression, right? And how do you find FAC and FAB? It's just by summation of forces in the X is equals to 0. In this case, so forces in the X will be FAC. Going this, I say, going that direction, I say positive. Okay, I can say going this direction, positive, going that direction, negative. So in that case, it's going that side. It's going in the left direction. So this will be positive. Going the other direction should be plus. Going that side is negative. It is minus FAB. Now you remember our SOHCAHTOA, right? You need to find this angle here, and you know how to find that angle, right? So the angle that you are supposed to use, once you find that angle, we need to get a component for FAB in the x-axis, right? So in this case, which sine, cos, or tan are we supposed to use? You know very well, if you use a sine, it will be, in this case, a sine will be opposite. So the opposite, it will be the component in the y. So in this case, it will be cos theta. Your angle there will be theta, equals to 0. Right? You have got two unknowns. This will be your equation 1. You go to another equation. Which equation? The one that I can use so that I can find them. You can also say summation of forces in the y is equals to 0. Right? So in that case, you're only going to have two forces. So in the horizontal, we have said going left positive, going right negative. We can as well do the same in the vertical. We say going up positive, going down negative. Right? So summation of forces in the y. So our 30 is going down. So I'm going to say negative 30, right? FAB going up, it will be a plus FAB sine theta is equals to 0. From here, you would find your FAB. Once you find your FAB, you go and substitute into the first equation. Then you find your FAC. Then you have the force there and the force there. The next one, you come to this force or this force. This is how simple it is. On B, you do the same. Summation of forces in the X, summation of forces in the Y. Right? You already have the AB. You want to find the BC and the BC. Yeah, BD and BC. You have two equations and you have got two unknowns. You can find that. You do the same. Once you find this, then you come to this joint which is C. Then you are going to have, you know this one, you know this one. The unknown is just that and that. You have got two equations and two equations. Once you get that, then you come down there. Or you come here. Since you already know this one, the only unknown will be this one and that one. Then you are done. I think I've already explained. The way they did this, they first came up with a free body diagram, as I earlier told you. You had the force there, a 30, you have a force there, a 20. Then I told you that where you have there at E, you are going to have two forces. Then where you go there at the joint, this joint, I said there's a moment, and there's a force, and another force there. Right? But you can still find the force in each member without considering that. But for those who would want to do some experiments, you can use that method by finding the forces there and the forces here as your free body diagram. You're still going to find the same answer. But for me, I showed you that you can still find the members, this one, that is AB and AC, even without drawing the free body diagram for the whole structure. And I think it's even stated there. If it were not desired to calculate the external reactions at D and E, the analysis for a cantilever truss could begin with the joint at the loaded end, which is A. However, this truss would be analyzed completely, so the first step would be to compute the external forces at D and E for the free body diagram of it as a whole. The equations of equilibrium are the ones that are shown there. Why they ignored this? Because the question was not asking for you find the supports or the external reactions at A, or maybe say at E and this point. The question didn't ask you that. They just said find the forces within or from each member A, B, B, D, and so on. Right? That's why they made it easier by you just assuming that this member, the D whatever end there, meaning the end, this joint, it will still give us the force of that member. So it doesn't matter. But if the question says first find the external reactions, then you need to do that. Then you find the moment there, you find the force at that joint and also at that joint. Hope that's clear. Just like I have explained, you always need to apply our equations of equilibrium, that is summation of moments, summation of forces in the X, summation of forces in the Y, for us to get whether the force in that member is in tension or compression. I think I've explained on how you get that. The first step was at A, then the next step went to B, because at B already we know this, right? The only thing that you are looking for is this and that, right? That is summation of forces in the Y, summation of forces in the X. Then from there it goes to, I think that is C, right? Because C, we already know that guy. The one that I also know this guy, right? And we know this one. So the unknown is this one, and that one is CD and CE, and so on. Then you are done. You find all the forces within those members. This is how simple it is. The same principles that always don't forget. Don't forget the issue of the signs, positive or negative. You need to agree, and you need to be consistent. You need to be consistent. If you say this direction is plus, let it be plus throughout your calculations. Don't change. Then of course that would be negative. And if you agree that going down it's a minus, be consistent throughout your calculations. Don't forget about that. Always apply our equations of equilibrium, and don't forget about signs, positive, negative. Whether it's a moment, if you agree again a moment, this will be positive or that will be negative. Don't forget Be consistent as you are doing your calculations. Don't change. Just be consistent. Another example. Determine the forces acting in all members of the truss shown below. Consider, when you look at A, at joint A, we have a pin connection. Always a pin connection. A pin connection, we have a force in the X and another force in the Y. And at C, we have a roller who always going to have one force which is vertical. So what I mean here is, here you have a force, you can call it FC, and you're going to have another one at A, which can be maybe AY, and the other one AX. In terms of the directions, whether it is facing left or right, it's just an assumption. It is just an assumption. But from inspection and the experience, when you look at this structure, the only horizontal force, if we say this is the X and this is the Y, the only force in the X-axis is a 3 kilonewton. So therefore, the force that I'm going to have at A, it is supposed to be opposite that 3 kilonewton force. Can you remember the third law, the third law of Newton's? Can you remember? So, just from your judgment, the correct direction of this force is supposed to be opposite to the 3 kilonewton force. Once we do that, what is next? Where am I going to start from? You can start from B. Right? You draw your free body diagram there. You have your force, your 3 kilonewton. You have your force in the member BC, BD, and BA. You do your summation of forces in the X, summation of forces in the Y. How many unknowns do you have? And how many equations do you have? You can as well even start from A. But before you do that, you first need to find the reactions at A and C. How do you find the reactions at A and C? You still use the same equations, summation of forces in the X, summation of forces in the Y. You're going to find two unknowns. But I can only find one unknown if I have got only one unknown. What can I do? You now apply the summation of moments about A equal to 0. Why am I doing this? I'm trying to get rid of the unknowns. Once I say summation of moments about A, I'm getting rid of the unknowns at A. That is the force, the AY, and the AX. The only unknown that I'm going to have would be the force at C, which I can call maybe CY. Once I have the reactions, I choose whichever joint A, B, or C, apply the equations of equilibrium, then you are done.
You have got only two unknown. This one and that one. But even the method that I've done, you will still get the same answer. So there is some flexibility on how to start or which joint to start with.
At some point, you can even start with the joint B. You can start with joint B. You get stuck there. But when you get stuck, does not mean that is the end. No. You are going to have equation 1, equation 2, equation 3 with 3 unknowns. You are not stuck. Then you move to the next joint. You go to maybe A. You go to A, you would find maybe you are going to find 4C, A, B. Then you go and replace in the equations that you made under joint B. So it's very flexible. Very flexible. Whichever joint you start with, but also consider time. Consider time. Follow the instructions. I think from the instructions here, it stated that start from a point where there are minimum number of members and one known force, which happens to be this. But still, me, I started with this one. You can still get the same answer. Even when you start with that one, joint B, you still get the same answer. But time, you consume too much time. When you start with B, joint B, you spend a lot of time. But you still find the same answer. I think this is clear, as I've explained. Here they are giving you signs. When you go that side is positive, when you go that side negative. This is how they are coming out with the negative, positive, negative, and whatever. Which also applies there. When it goes to the right, these are your own assumptions. You make your own assumptions. The only thing that you need to do is just be consistent. Don't forget. Don't forget. For summation of forces in the y equals to 0, which components do I have? I think I've done that here. We're going to have 1 there. And here I said 1 the other side and 1 the other side. So this was our Fy, and this is our Fx. This is our Ey. So here we have got, already I know this component. So I'm going to have, and I said that positive, that negative, if I can remember, then that positive, that negative. Right? The components in the y. I will start with the 130 pound. 130 pound, the direction is facing downwards. So it is a negative 130 times the component that I'm getting. In this case, it is the horizontal, which is a 12. 12 over 13. Right? Then you go to the next. The next y component is the E, which is a plus. Ey. The last component is facing upwards, which is also a plus. Plus Fy is equals to 0. You have got 2 unknowns, Ey and Fy. Right? Then you can come now to say summation of moments. You have got 2 unknowns, which is Ey and Fy. This component and that component. So for me to find these unknowns, I'm supposed to make sure that the moment where I get my moment, I get rid of one unknown. So I can do summation of moments about E. When I do summation of moments about E, this simply means the component Ey is passing along where I'm getting the moment. So it's 0. The only unknown I'm going to remain with is going to be Fy. Or if I do summation of moments about F equals to 0, what is going to happen? The force Fy, is passing along where I'm getting the moment. That simply means Fy becomes 0. I'm going to have only one unknown, which is going to be Ey. That's how you can get Ey using this, or you can get Fy using that. This is how simple it is. Once you have the reactions at F, at E, right? Then the next, which joint can you use? Which point? Which joint? For me, I can say I would go to A. Because A, I've got two unknowns and one known. When I find that, I come to B. I already know that unknown. When I'm done with that, I can come to F. If I go to F, I already know Fx, Fy. The only unknown, there are only two, this and this. Right? Once I get that, then I come to D. D, I'm going to have two unknowns, which is DE and DC. Right? Then the last one will be which one? It's either I come to C or I come to E, because the only unknown is CE. You are done. You get your 20% in a test or in an exam. These are just the solutions anyway. This is how they get those solutions. Summation of forces in the Y, summation of forces in the, these assumptions, let us not forget. We assume up, positive, up, whichever makes you comfortable. Whichever makes you comfortable. Whichever makes you comfortable. Somewhere you would see, somewhere you get stuck. You end up using the third equation, which is summation of moments about some point, where you are going to have two unknowns and only one equation. So you need to create another equation so that you have got the equal number of unknowns and the number of equations. Zero force members. Truss analysis using the methods of joints is greatly simplified if we can first identify those members which support no loading. These zero force members are used to increase the stability of the truss during construction to provide added supports if loading has been changed. The zero force members of a truss can generally be found by inspection of each of the joints. For example, consider the truss shown there. You draw the free body diagram at point A, this point. It is seen that member AB and AF are zero force members. The reason there is very simple. When you look at joint A, when you do summation of forces in the X, summation of forces in the X, you will find force AB is equals to 0. When you do summation of forces in the Y, you would find force AF is equals to 0. So these members are zero force members. They are zero force members. So whenever you find any truss with that type of connection, just know that those two are zero force members, unless there is a force, external force applied on that force, then it will no longer be a zero force member. Why? Because when you say summation of forces in the Y, you are going to have another component who is going to counteract the force FAF. Right? Note that we could not have come to this conclusion if we had considered the free body diagram of joints F or B. Meaning, if we considered this, your assumption could not work. But after you do your calculations, you will still find that your force FA or BE is still 0. In a similar manner, consider a free body diagram at joint D. Here again, it seems that DC and D are zero force members. DE and this DE and DC. Why here are they zero force members? They are zero force members because of the manner, the way the designer had put the axis. He had said allow ED to be x-axis, then that to be y. When you do your summation of forces along the x and summation of forces along the y-axis, you would find that there is no counterclockwise force in DE. Hope this is clear. This is only simply because the way the designer had put the axis, it was along the x-axis, that was DE. So when you do your summation of forces in the x, and summation of forces in your y, you would find that there are zero force members. In a similar manner, consider the free body diagram of joint D, which is this one. Here again, it is seen that DC and DE are zero force members. DC and DE. DC. From these observations, we can conclude that if only two non-collinear members from a truss join and no external load or support reaction is applied to that joint, the two members must be zero force members. The load on the truss in figure A is therefore supported by only 5 members as shown, which happens to be that. Now consider the truss shown above. The free body diagram of the pin at joint B is seen in figure B, which is that. That is a free body diagram. By orienting the x-axis along the DC and DE and the x-axis along the DA, here, because there's a 90 degrees there, that is your x and that is your y. It is seen that DA is a zero force member who happens to be that member. Note that this is not the case for member CA. In general then, if 3 members form a truss joint for which 2 of the members are collinear, the third member is a zero force member provided no external force or support reaction has a component that acts along this member. This is just the same as the statement that I just explained on the previous slide. The truss shown here, that shows you the suitable members that are supporting load. Find time, prove that these conditions are making sense. Try to do some calculations to see if really you find them as zero. Not as the assumption that I'm making. You try to find the force on a member C without this assumption of saying it's a zero force member. And for real, you will find that that force is a zero force member. You would find that that member doesn't, even if you remove it, nothing will change. It is a zero force member. Thank you for your attention. This is the first part of structural analysis. This is lecture A6. We have gone through the method of analyzing trusses, which is the method of joints. And of course, I've given you some introduction and also some practical application of trusses. The next part, we are going to look at how to analyze trusses using the method of sections. Then also we'll look at not only planar trusses, but we'll also do, or we'll also solve problems such as space trusses or 3D trusses. Again, we'll also look at statically determinant trusses, internal and external redundancy, just as we did in our lecture A5, where we are looking at the equilibrium of a rigid body. I end here. Thank you.